For Trekkies my age, TNG is kind of our default Star Trek. Even though I prefer Deep Space Nine and find it to be a superior show in pretty much every way, when I think about Star Trek, more often than not, I'm thinking about something to do with the adventures of the crew of the Enterprise D. And the breakout character of that crew is this guy, Data, who inherits Spock's role as the character who best embodies the noblest qualities of humanity despite not actually being human. Data soon becomes much more than Spock, but an android. He holds a special place in the hearts of many of us TNG-era Trekkies, and with good reason. He might be an android from the 24th century, but he's also one of the most relatable characters on the show. Data, like most of us, yearns to transcend his own limitations. Despite having superior physical and mental abilities to humans, he aspires to be more like them. Data, like Pinocchio before him, wants to be a real boy. Is that even possible? What is Data missing that keeps him from being human, or at least fully knowing what it's like? And assuming we can even identify what those gaps are, is there any way he can fill them? For starters, let's think about universal, or at least very common human experiences. The basic life experiences that everyone, or almost everyone, goes through. There are the big two, birth and death. Everybody experiences those, whether we know it or not. And Data experiences those too. Kind of. His birth isn't the same sort of birth that all of us have experienced, but he was created. He did come into being as a conscious entity. I think that counts, doesn't it? I don't know. We'll come back to that. And he dies. At least twice, actually. The first time in Star Trek Nemesis, and then they bring him back in Star Trek Picard just so he can die again. I think Data probably understands death better than any of his fellow Star Trek characters. Well, most of them, anyway. But there are universal human experiences beyond birth and death, and Data doesn't go through all of those. For instance, childhood. In the TNG episode Inheritance, we meet Data's mother, Juliana, the ex-wife of his creator, Dr. Sung. Juliana describes Data as being much like a child shortly after his initial activation, struggling with the development of motor control and socialization as Sung refined his programming. He even went through a phase where he wanted to be naked all the time, and who among us hasn't been there? Still, that's not quite the same thing as a human childhood. We don't get the impression that Data's childhood, such as it was, lasted for years, nor did he have the experience of growing up, something he recognizes and regrets, as he shares with Artem in Star Trek Insurrection. Related to growing up is the experience of aging. Data, in a concession to the unavoidable fact that Brent Spiner, the actor who plays him, grows visibly older throughout the course of the TV series and movies, is established as having been made to age in a manner similar to humans. But it's not clear if this aging program only causes Data to appear older, or if it also manifests other consequences of aging, like loss of physical strength, changes in weight, balance, cognitive ability, etc. If it doesn't simulate those things as well, then Data doesn't really have a comparable experience to human aging. There are other universal or near-universal human experiences I think we can say Data has in one form or another. He makes friends, he has sex, he copes with loss when friends of his die or move on, he has a romantic relationship, though his inability to feel emotions makes that a very different sort of experience than most of us have had, and eventually he acquires the ability to feel emotions, though even then it's not quite the same as it is for us. In Star Trek First Contact, we see that Data can turn off his emotion chip whenever he chooses, an ability we biological folk don't have. Would it be possible for Data to have those basic human experiences he missed out on? Could some adjustments be made to his programming and his physical structure to give him a realistic approximation of what it really feels like to grow older? Sure, but even if he were to do that, I still don't think Data would truly understand what it feels like to be human. And that's because the most important universal human experience is one that Data can never have. The experience of being recognized and treated as a human, particularly by other humans. It's not that Data has been mistreated. His friends on the Enterprise regard him as an equal and stick up for him when he is disrespected for being an android. Captain Picard even fights to establish that Data is entitled to equal rights under the law in the classic TNG episode The Measure of a Man. But Data's still an android, and his friends know he's an android. And he knows that they know. And even if it doesn't result in a negative experience, it does result in a different experience than a human, any human, would have. The only way Data could have a truly human experience would be to experience life as a human. Since he's a character in a Star Trek show, there are all sorts of ways this could be accomplished. He could ask Q to do it. And Q could say, but Data, at the end of Deja Q, I said I would never curse you by turning you into a human, and also you told me that's not what you wanted anyway. And Data could be like, I know what I told you, I changed my mind, blue fairy me, dude. Or he could create a cloned human body with a blank brain and transfer his consciousness into it. We've seen human consciousnesses transferred into android bodies a bunch of times by now, so how hard could it be to just reverse the process? Pretty easy, I'd say, especially since all of this is made up. Data could even make the cloned body a child's body, which would allow him to live out an actual childhood and experience growing up, going through puberty, growth spurts, his voice changing, acne, hating his parents, all the fun stuff he missed out on the first time around. Well, if we're going to be sticklers about this, and we want Data to really become a real boy, even that's not quite going to do it. We could put Data's mind into a human body, let him experience childhood, growth, aging, all of that, but he'd still be Data. He'd have his established personality and sense of self, his knowledge and memories accumulated over his lifetime as an android. And perhaps most importantly, he'd have the awareness that he had previously been an android and had been transferred into a human body for the purpose of having the experience. In other words, he'd know it was an experiment. That knowledge alone would make Data's experience much different than the typical experience a human being would have as they go through their life. Plus, other people don't get to start out with several decades of accumulated knowledge and experience already in their heads. Or I didn't, at least. So, the way I see it, the only way Data could ever truly fill in those gaps in his experience and know what it's like to actually live a human life would be if he could somehow arrange to be reincarnated and go through a whole lifetime from birth to death without the memories from his android life. Again, luckily, this is Star Trek, so if we can imagine a way for Data to pull this off, he can do it. And I can imagine a couple of ways. We could always do the Q thing, like I mentioned earlier, but it's also fairly easy to imagine how this reincarnation could be accomplished technologically. No Q magic needed. Data, along with his doctor and cyberneticist buddies, creates a human body from a cloned embryo or something. It could even be genetically engineered so that when the child grows up, it will look like Data, only with a better tan and a more natural eye color. When the brain is developed enough, Data's consciousness is transferred over from his positronic brain using the method Dr. Ira Graves uses to jump his mind into Data's body in The Schizoid Man, or that Alton Sung uses to transfer Picard's mind into the Golem at the end of Season 1 of Star Trek Picard, or some other method we've never heard of before. It doesn't matter. The point is, Data's consciousness goes into the brain of this cloned human fetus, but with one important qualification. Data's memories of his life up to the point of the transfer are contained in his new human brain, but blocked, so that as human Data grows up and lives his life, he doesn't remember ever being original Data. And some of you might be saying, wait a minute, that seems like an awfully delicate, advanced procedure. How can you possibly transfer Data's consciousness into a fetal human brain, including his memories, but have all those memories blocked? Well, you write a line of dialogue where someone says that's what they did, and you have a character in the story say that line, and then you're done. Data is born in his human body with no memory of who he is, or used to be, I guess. He's raised by human parents, preferably people who also don't know who he used to be. The years and decades pass, and Data, or whatever his name is, gets to live an authentic human life for better and for worse, the joy and the pain, the whole human mortal deal. He grows old, he dies. Someone who knows what the deal is gets a notification, shows up, transfers the consciousness from the human brain back into Data's android body, unblocks Data's original memories, wakes him up, and now Data not only has the memories and experiences of his original life as an android, he also knows what it's like to be human, because he has been human. Now, this is not a perfect solution. I have some ethical concerns, and Data, being an ethical person himself, I would imagine he would have some concerns as well. For example, Data's consciousness would essentially be overriding the consciousness that would have been present in that cloned body. Sure, it's a clone, but clones are people too. Even if it was a genetically engineered clone designed to resemble Data, made from scratch for the purpose of being Data's human body for his human life, you have to figure that if they didn't put Data's mind in there, this clone would have grown up and developed its own personality. Or let's look at this same problem from another angle. Since Data's original memories will be blocked during his human lifetime, and he'll be starting over from birth, you could argue that Data is essentially becoming an entirely new person. And then, after that person dies, they'll wake up in the body of an android and realize that they weren't actually who they thought they were. But their entire life was just an exercise so an android could know what it was like to be a human. Which raises an interesting question. If you are actually an android who has been transplanted into a human body and had your memory erased, do you have a right to know? Do the integrity of the experiment and your original pre-experiment desire to have an authentic human experience supersede your rights as an individual during the experiment to know important things about yourself? Here's another one. What about Data's human family? If he lives a typical life, chances are he'll eventually have a long-term partner, maybe even a spouse with whom he has children. Might it not be a little upsetting for the surviving spouse, if there is one, or the kids and the grandkids, to find out after his death that the person they knew had actually secretly been an android in a human body all along? And how would that whole process even work? Data's human body dies, and then not long after, a scientist shows up with an ice bucket and says, "Hey, I'm so sorry for your loss, but it's kind of important that I grab his brain. I'll just be a sec." Or how about ethical issues that might arise from Data's unique situation during his life? Suppose, during his life as a human, Data encounters a life or death predicament that, if he were able to access his android memories, he could resolve safely and easily, but since his android memories are blocked, he isn't able to respond as effectively, and someone dies. Is preserving Data's wish to live a typical human experience, not influenced by his true identity as an android, worth that person's life? Because it would involve creating essentially an entirely new person, a person who wouldn't know their life was part of an experiment, and it would also involve other people who also wouldn't know about the experiment, at least not until it was over. Now that I think about it, this put Data's consciousness into a baby and let him live a human life plan has some pretty serious moral drawbacks. Serious enough that if I were a character in this story instead of the person making it up, I might not be able to take part in it at all. Data might not be able to either. Like I said, he's a pretty ethical dude. Maybe that could be the payoff of this imaginary installment of TNG. Because clearly, having Data transfer his self into a human body and live out an entire human lifespan is a tad ambitious to work as the premise for a Next Generation episode. The bulk of the episode could be Data conceiving this plan and working to carry it out, but when he gets to the moment of truth, the ethical concerns are just too serious to overlook, and he decides he can't go through with it. Could there be any other way? Well, if you have suggestions that I haven't mentioned, I would love to see them in the comments, but before that, I do have one last idea. What if we take the basic premise of the put Data's consciousness in a baby experiment, which is that Data can only truly know what it's like to be human if he's able to actually experience life as one, with everybody, including himself, thinking he's a human and treating him accordingly, and play it out not in real life, but in a realistic open-world holodeck simulation. Virtual reincarnation. Here's how it works. We don't need to change anything physical about Data. He can stay in his android body. We don't need to move his consciousness anywhere. All we do is temporarily block his memories so he doesn't remember who he is or anything about his life up until now, and regress his skills and motor coordination and stuff like that back to where they would be for a human infant. Then we plug him into a virtual world, either by just putting him in a holodeck and letting the program run, or plugging him into some kind of computer program that sends sensory information directly into his brain. So Data experiences everything in the virtual world as if it's real and he's actually interacting with it in 3 dimensions, but there's no actual physicality. Kind of like the mini holodeck they use to trap Hollow Moriarty at the end of Ship in a Bottle. While in this virtual world, Data thinks this is his real life, believes he's a human being, feels human emotions thanks to his emotion chip, is treated like a human by all the super realistic NPCs he meets, perceives the world in a way that's appropriate for whatever his simulated age is at the moment, and gets to have what would probably be a fairly realistic simulation of a typical human life, given what we've seen that the holodeck is capable of over the years. When Data reaches the end of his simulated life and dies, the program ends, his original memories are restored, and he wakes up as his old self again, with a lifetime of human experiences under his belt. It wouldn't be as authentic as the put Data's mind in a baby plan, but it also wouldn't have nearly the same ethical problems. Plus, they could probably adjust the speed of the program so that Data could race through an entire human lifespan in way less time than it would take an ordinary person living an actual life. Data would experience everything as though it were happening in real time, but in reality, he could live out decades in a matter of days or even hours. And as far as the technology required to pull this off, come on, Geordi could probably throw together the necessary rig during a cutaway to check in on the B plot of the episode. Data drops by main engineering and asks Geordi to help him make a holodeck program that will allow him to experience a simulated human life. Geordi says, "Sure." Cut to Worf's quarters. Uh-oh, Alexander ate too many slices of blood pie, and now he's got a tummy ache. Cut back to engineering. Geordi's done. Come here, Data, let's suppress them robot memories and get this show on the road. So, I think those are some serviceable story pitches based on the idea of Data wanting to have a more complete or authentic human experience. If any of you have suggestions to improve them or original ideas of your own for a story exploring this subject, I'd love to see those in the comments. But I think maybe the best way to answer these questions of which human experiences Data misses out on and if or how he could have them is, yes, to explore some hypothetical scenarios like we've done here, but ultimately to recognize that there's nothing incomplete or inauthentic about Data's own experience. Sure, there are some aspects of life as a biological human that Data doesn't go through, but there are common aspects of life as a biological human that many biological humans don't go through. Many of us think of learning to walk as a universal life experience, but not everyone learns to walk for a variety of reasons. Are people who have never been able to walk still human? The answer is yes, by the way. It seems obvious, but you can't be too careful about that shit these days. Likewise, there are things which are universal human experiences, but that aren't as similar for everyone as we often think they are. For example, it's sometimes said that every human being had to pass through the legs of a woman to get here. And while that is true for most people, it's obviously not true for everybody. Many people were born as the result of a C-section, a surgery that delivers the baby through an incision in the abdomen. That's how I was born, actually. I'll never forget the first time my mom told me that story. It totally ruined my birthday party. That phrase, everyone passes through the legs of a woman to get here, has also unfortunately been appropriated by bigots to dehumanize and delegitimize the identities of trans people. Our continually expanding and improving understanding of human sexuality and gender tells us that even among those who aren't born via C-section, not everyone passes through the legs of a woman in order to get here. Trans men exist, and they sometimes get pregnant and bear children. It's a fact of life. And it's a fact I bring up here because it's an example of how even something as seemingly universal as birth is actually a far more complex and individual experience than we often perceive it to be. The truth is, there is no default human experience. There's no list of things that you need to go through before your experience is worthy of being considered authentically human. Data's experience is very different in many ways than Geordie's, but Geordie's is very different from Beverly's, and Beverly's is very different from Chief O'Brien's, and I could keep going. And yet, despite the sometimes vast differences between individuals, all of their experiences are extremely similar as well. The range of human experience in the real world and in the fantasy world of Star Trek is so broad that people can lead lives that are both radically different from and remarkably similar to one another at the same time. One of the recurring themes of Data's character arc throughout Star Trek The Next Generation is that, whether he realizes it or not, he's already human in all the ways that really matter. Sure, he could try one of the projects I've proposed in this video to try and learn what it's like to be a child or to have some other experience that he hasn't had during his life as an android, but he doesn't need to fill any gaps in his experience in order for it to be authentically human. It's already that. Like Pinocchio, Data doesn't need anyone or anything to transform him into a real boy. He's been one all along. I want to thank Michael Piccirilli, who commissioned this video, for providing me with a prompt that inspired me to explore what turned out to be a really interesting subject here. I haven't traditionally solicited commissions for videos, but thanks to Michael, I'm going to change that policy starting now. So here's the deal. I'm opening up commissions for Not Actually Trek Actually videos. $50 per topic, payable via PayPal or a $50 Patreon donation or Zelle or whatever other app you can use to send people money. Just make sure you can attach a note telling me who you are, what the money is for, and what your requested topic is. The topic can be anything Star Trek related, anything you think might potentially make a good Trek Actually or Not Actually Trek Actually video. You can even request a snarky summary of a Star Trek episode if you want, because I know there's been some interest in me doing videos where I just do funny episode recaps. So use your imaginations. As the creator, I reserve the right to decline to produce a video on any given topic for any reason. In the unlikely event that I just can't figure out how to produce a video from your proposed topic, I'll contact you and give you the opportunity to either suggest another topic, or if you can't think of another one, I'll refund your $50. No worries. These commissioned videos will be produced in addition to my regular monthly Trek Actually videos, the ones where the topics are decided by the votes of patrons and members. So if this turns out to be a popular thing and I get a lot of commissions, please be patient with me when it comes to producing your videos, because I can only work so fast, and I want these videos to be of the same quality as the rest of my stuff. Or maybe even good. If you do commission a video from me, I promise I'll get to it as soon as I can on a first-come, first-served basis. And again, if I find I just can't make it work, I'll either let you pick another topic or refund your $50. So there you go. Commissions are now open. If you have any questions, you can email me at thatguysteveshives@gmail.com. Please mention that it's Trek Actually commission related in the subject line, and I'll get back to you. And if you have an idea already and want to go ahead and send in your commission, you can use that same email address to send me money through PayPal or Zelle or whatever other money transfer app you use. Also, don't forget that if you don't want to commission a video, but you do want to support this channel, you can do that by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, or by clicking the join button to become a channel member. And I would encourage all of you who enjoy my work and can afford to become a supporter to do so, because I couldn't do it without my patrons and members. Thank you all so much. That's the business taken care of, whether you plan on commissioning a video or not. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.